Hello! Welcome to my sewing channel, sewing and craft channel. Today I would like to talk about sewing around small children. I've been sewing around kids for about 13 years now. I started off with costuming and slowly worked my way into different areas of sewing. I still have a lot to learn and it's fun. It's a great part of my life, and a lot of people will tell you that you can't sew around children, but that's not true. You can sew around children, you just have to be really careful. So as a mother of 3 children, one of them has autism and was very unpredictable when he was younger, I've picked up a few tricks here and there, and I've put together 5 tips that I hope you will find helpful. And if you're watching this and you have something that I don't mention, go ahead and leave it in the comments and we can all work together in our little sewing online community to keep our children safe and also keep you safe, because it can be dangerous for you too. Oh, also, I don't have a sewing room. I can't afford it. I have 3 kids and we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we're all squished together, living on top of each other, and I'm also sewing on top of that. So I have to be extra careful throughout the day to make sure that my children stay safe. The first thing that I would suggest you getting is a magnetic pincushion. This is mine. There's lots of different kinds. There's ones you can get that have stronger magnets than the one that I have, but at some point your children will get your pins. And they will take all of the pins out of the pincushion and spread them around the ground, and it's a pain. So if you have a magnetic pincushion, you can just quickly run it over the top of the pins and it'll suck the pins up. This is really handy. I just actually recently got this and I love it because I've already used it for that reason, to suck up the pins that my daughter had gotten. It's nice. The second thing I recommend getting is a flashlight. Every once in a while you'll drop a pin and you won't be able to find it. It'll blend in with the carpet or linoleum or whatever, it'll roll someplace funny. But you can take your flashlight and you shine it on the ground, and then the pin's gonna reflect light and you'll be able to find that pin. This has never not worked for me when I've lost a pin. And so you won't use it very often, but when you do, you'll be grateful for it. Now, the third thing relating with pins is, as sewers, seamstresses? Is sewers actually a word? I don't know. I feel like that's something that I should know. But as someone who sews, we'll say that, we often put pins in our mouth. Not even thinking about it. Sometimes you're not even aware that you have done it, but your kids are watching. They're always watching, and they will emulate that behavior when they get your pincushion.
Because they will get your pincushion.
Try to get in a habit of not putting it in your mouth. People can inhale pins, and you think that that wouldn't happen to you, but there are horror stories online. Google, I inhaled a sewing pin or something like that, and stories come up where people have inhaled it and it's either gone into their stomach or it's gone into their lungs, and it can lead to surgery, like major surgery, to get that pin taken out. And you don't want that to happen to your kids, and you don't want that to happen to you. So this is something that I am working on. I have a terrible habit of doing this, and I've seen my daughter find a pin or pluck a little pin out and stick it in her mouth because that's what she has seen me do. So I'm working on that, and hopefully we can get a handle on that. So keep your pin cushions nearby you, and think about getting a wrist pin cushion or something like that, or like a little pin cushion that you can put onto your sewing machine and to stick your pins there, so you can just get out of that habit. The second tip I have for sewing around children is, if you can move your sewing table against the wall, you're limiting access to the sewing pedals underneath your table. If you're sewing at your dining room table and that's the only space that you have, you know, that's okay, but you need to be aware. You won't be able to see them crawl under the table, and they can push down the pedal, and all of a sudden you're sewing, and then your sewing machine's going as fast as it can go, and you could possibly sew over your finger. If you can't move your table against the wall, think about getting a finger guard, because kids are curious about the pedals. They're interesting. They make a machine go, so who wouldn't be curious about a pedal? It's only happened to me once. I did not sew through my finger. That's like the loudest toy in the house. I'm gonna take that. Okay, it's only happened to me once. My now 6-year-old had climbed underneath the table at our old place and pressed the pedal down while I was sewing. And it almost gave me a heart attack because it happened so fast. And luckily I didn't sew through my finger, but my cousin when she was little, she did sew through her finger, so I know it can happen. And you just want to take every precaution to make sure that it doesn't. One thing you could do if you can't move your table against a wall is purchase one of those baby fences that go around the table, because you want to be able to see all access points to underneath your table. And you can see in your peripheral vision, you know, the sides around you. You just can't see, you know, at the floor at the bottom of the table on the other side of the table. So put a fence around that, then chances of a little baby crawling under the table and pushing that pedal down while you're sewing is a lot less. If you can find a sewing table similar to the one that I found, and now mine is an antique, it's from the 50s, I think, but there's only one access point. She can't climb in through the sides because there's the drawers and the cabinet there. So there's no chance of my daughter climbing under there and pushing the pedal down. Another reason to have your sewing table pushed up against the wall is you can tuck the cord in between the wall and the table. And then if a child comes along and pulls from underneath the table, pulls on that cord, they can't pull the sewing machine on top of their head. Sewing machines are pretty heavy. Like, they'd have to pull on that cord really hard. But, you know, you just don't want to take any chances. And if anytime you can hide a cord, I recommend doing so. Now, probably the most common injury to kids and sewing that I know of is pulling on the cord of an iron and then the iron falling on that child. It's never happened to me, it's never happened to my kids, but I think it did happen to my sister possibly, if I'm remembering right, when she was little. But somebody in my family, I think, pulled an iron and it hit their toe. But anyways, I don't use an ironing board anymore unless I absolutely have to. I've got one of those wool pressing mats. I think it's a fairly large size for the kind that you can get on Amazon. They're pricey, and it is damaging my furniture a little bit. I need to put some kind of like plastic down underneath my wool pad because the steam from the iron goes through it. But the ironing board is really, the ironing board is not very stable, so a child can go and pull on it and possibly, you know, knock the iron off the ironing board that way, depending on the ironing board that you have. Some are pretty stable, some are not. And they're also quite tall, so if the iron does fall, it'll hit your child harder, and you don't want that to happen. They can get burnt, and they can get a concussion. It's just a nightmare, and you need to do everything you can to make sure that that doesn't happen. So for me, I use a very sturdy dresser. I have my wool pad on top of that, and I tuck the cords back behind. I'll show you in just a second. I do have the cord kind of going up and over my shelf, because I have more room when I'm ironing and I don't have to like mess with the cord as much when it's for some reason hooked up that way. So that's what I do. Technically she could still reach that cord and pull on it, but the chances are less likely. She's gonna have a really hard time accessing it. She can't just like walk by and be like, ooh, a cord, yank, and pull the iron on top of her. She'll have to kind of get up on her tiptoes and really plan the action to get that cord. Yeah, so that's dangerous. Do everything you can to make sure that that doesn't happen. Hide your cords, of course, protect your plugs, all of that. Tip number 4 is what I like to call roadblocks and distractions. So if you see here, I'll pop over and videotape that in a second, but I have this cardboard thing. I don't know what this thing is called, but you know, every sewer has one, and like occasionally you use it, but I use mine more as just a roadblock to keep her out of my storage bins, which I don't keep anything dangerous in there, and it's secured to the wall so she can't pull it over on herself, but I don't want her going through that stuff and spreading it around the house. So I just put this in front of it, and she actually kind of leaves it alone. So that is my roadblock that I use, just something that kind of keeps it out of sight, out of mind, and you know, make sure that there's nothing in there that could hurt her in the first place. And the distraction part, have a spot in your sewing area that you can put stuff that they can play with. Now this also, I don't know, you kind of have to market it right to your child, if that makes sense. Like, oh, because you're trustworthy now, I'll let you play with these zippers. But you have to be very careful because I don't want you, I don't want the zippers to get hurt. But now that you're so old, I trust that you can play with these zippers and you'll be okay. And then they kind of think that, oh, this is special, so they'll automatically gravitate to that particular area that you want them to. So the 3 drawers that I have on the bottom here are all stuff that I am totally fine with her playing with her dragging around the house, spreading around, because none of it's going to hurt her, and I can easily go back and gather it all up and just stick it in the drawer. It doesn't have to be organized, and it's fine. And she can also stick some of her stuff in there, which she really likes. So yeah, I recommend roadblocks and distractions. Anytime you can cover up something that you don't want them to play with, just get it out of their eyesight, and chances of them leaving it alone are a lot higher. And then also having areas that it's okay for them to play with, but just like slightly discourage it so they're more interested. That's probably really messed up, and I don't know if I need to go to therapy for that one, but I just want to keep her safe, and I want her to stay out of the stuff that could possibly hurt her. So that's what I do with that. And tip number 5 has to do with general safety habits. If you have children, they're spreading toys around, you're walking around with scissors, you need to be very careful. You have to always be aware of what's on the floor for your safety and for your child's safety, because you could fall with scissors in your hand, tripping over some toy that you didn't know was there. So you just have to be extra cautious with stuff like that. Also, I found that this to be really helpful because I do have such limited space where I live. Every time I finish a project, I go through my sewing desk, I go through my sewing bin, I go through my drawers. Anything that my child could access, I go through and I reorganize it. I touch everything in the drawer. It might be a little OCD, but the reason that I do this is because if she does get into my sewing stuff, then when I leave the room or use the restroom and I come back and I see that she's gotten into my sewing things, I know exactly what she had access to. I know exactly what to look for, and I find that really helpful in keeping her safe. Also, you want to establish habits, and you put stuff back in the same place every time you use them. Every time you use your scissors and you're done using them, you need to get in the habit of putting them back right away. Don't leave them down, because you could forget about them and then your child could come along and grab it and, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my voice, but your child could come along and grab it and potentially hurt themselves, and you do not want that to happen. Alright guys, and that is it for this video. If you found these tips useful, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye!